Early one summer morning in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the Henderson household was filled with an eerie stillness. Spider lilies bloomed along the sidewalk, their white petals glowing in the soft dawn light. Inside, the furniture sat undisturbed, as if awaiting the return of laughter that once echoed through the rooms. 7-year-old Emily Henderson stood at the threshold of her father's bedroom door, clutching her favorite Raggedy Bear buttons against her chest. She stared down at the figure lying motionless on the floorboards beneath her father's bed. His breath did not rise, his chest did not fall. Panic rippled through her small frame as memories of yesterday's game swirled in her mind. Still, she refused to accept what everyone else already believed. Her father was not dead. He was simply hiding, tucked away beneath the floorboards where she knew he must be. Emily's mother, Laura, knelt beside the boy's bed, tears streaking paths down her cheeks. She gazed at her daughter with confusion and sorrow. "He's gone, sweetheart. The doctor said it was a massive heart attack." But Emily shook her head vigorously, her curls bouncing. "No, Mommy. Daddy isn't dead. He's under the floor. I saw him." Laura's whispered sobs gained strength as she stood, guiding Emily into the living room where officers had already arrived. 2 uniformed men moved silently, their expressions steeled by years on the force. They exchanged glances when Emily recounted her story, her tiny voice unwavering. Detective Miles Collins, a seasoned investigator with streaks of gray at his temples, crouched to Emily's level. "Sweetheart, what makes you so sure?" Emily's blue eyes burned with conviction. "He wasn't breathing, but his eyes were open. They told me secrets." Outside, dawn slowly gave way to morning, and neighbors hovered on porches, curiosity etched into their faces. The Henderson house stood at the corner of Maple and Birch, surrounded by white picket fences and blooming rose bushes. It was a picture-perfect home, except for the tragedy that had befallen the family. Talk of heart attacks and autopsies filled the air between coffee sips and newspaper pages. But in the eyes of a child, unseen truths often lurk in hidden spaces. Detective Collins straightened, his keen mind racing through possibilities. He had heard stories of children's uncanny intuition, of tiny prophets revealing buried secrets. He scanned the hardwood floors and noted the faint scuff marks near the bed, as though something heavy had been dragged recently. The floors did not creak as expected. They seemed unnaturally solid, almost concealing something. By mid-morning, the makeshift crime scene had taken shape. Yellow tape cordoned off the front door, and a pair of uniformed officers stood guard. A coroner's van idled at the curb, its engine humming softly. The Hendersons' neighbors exchanged hushed conversations, offering condolences yet directing curious glances toward the house. Laura held Emily in her arms, rocking her gently on the porch while the detective questioned her. Every so often, Emily's gaze would drift toward the front door, as if expecting her father to emerge at any moment. Collins crouched again, showing her a sketch pad where he made simple drawings of what Emily claimed to have seen. A dark space beneath the bed, wooden planks, dusty shadows, and the silhouette of a man. Emily pointed at the drawing and said, "That's where he is, just like I said." The detective's jaw clenched as he nodded, stepping back to ponder his next move. Laura Henderson paced inside the sparsely furnished living room, anxiety twisting her stomach. She replayed the night before, recalling her husband Richard returning from his evening jog looking pale and exhausted. He had stumbled into the house, mumbled something about a sharp pain in his chest, and collapsed on the floor. Laura rushed to his side, calling 911, but his eyes remained glassy. Paramedics had arrived within minutes and declared him dead at the scene. A doctor had confirmed the heart attack. Yet Emily insisted on a different truth, one that defied medical explanations. As Collins instructed the officers to examine the floorboards, Laura's heart pounded. She wanted to believe her daughter's innocence but feared it was a child's fantasy born of terror. When the first officer pried up a floorboard near the bed, a small cloud of dust floated into the air, revealing unexpected darkness below. "Detective." Collins stepped forward, his flashlight in hand as the officers removed more planks. The air beneath the floor smelled of damp earth and decay, stirring something ancient in his memory. He knelt by the opening and shone his light downward. At eye, first there was nothing more than dirt and scattered debris, but then a glint caught his eye. A gloved hand rose slowly as though guided by hope. He reached down, firm on his protocol, and pulled upward. Richard Henderson, gaunt and pale, emerged from his hiding place, his breathing shallow but alive. His eyes fluttered open, confusion and relief mingling in his gaze as he took in the faces peering down at him. Emily let out a gasp of delight and bounded forward, stepping into the opening to wrap her arms around her father's neck. Her father's lips trembled, barely forming a weak question. "How did you know?" Chaos erupted in the living room. Laura dropped to her knees, sobbing with relief, while officers assisted Richard to stand. His clothes were torn, covered in grime, and his skin bore bruises that hinted at something far darker than a simple heart attack. Paramedics checked his vitals. Surprisingly, his heart still beat, though weakly. The detective raised an eyebrow, processing the scene. How did Richard end up under his own floor? Emily climbed onto a chair, her small face illuminated by excitement and tears. "He told me the monsters would get him if I told, but I knew they couldn't hide him forever," she said. Collins studied Richard's injuries and the deep scratches on the floorboards. It was clear to him that this was no accident. He crouched beside Richard and asked gently, "Mr. Henderson, can you tell me what happened?" Richard's lips quivered before he whispered, "They came after me." Over the next hour, the detectives and paramedics worked in tandem, stabilizing Richard's condition while securing the scene for further investigation. The room buzzed with subdued chatter as forensic technicians dusted for fingerprints and collected evidence. Bloodstains marked the edges of the floor panels, and fragments of wood lay scattered around like splinters of truth. Emily sat on the sofa, holding Buttons close, her head resting against Laura's shoulder as the world shifted beneath their feet. Collins observed as Laura sprinkled her daughter's curls with gentle fingers, grateful for the miracle, but aware of the danger that lingered. Outside, neighbors gathered behind the yellow tape, murmuring speculations and sympathies. Some children cried, asking mothers why their parents couldn't play with them. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the front lawn as if warning that evil often hides in plain sight. Richard's memory came back in fragments. He recalled leaving work late that night, distracted by a series of threats delivered to his phone. Anonymous messages warned him to drop an investigation he had been quietly conducting into local corruption. As a mid-level accountant for a construction company, he stumbled upon financial irregularities implicating several powerful figures in town. When he confronted his boss, the warnings escalated. He tried to protect his family, moving late-night returns to morning hours and installing extra locks. But that final night, as he pulled into the garage, a black SUV screeched onto the street. Men wearing dark masks forced him into the trunk. He woke moments later in the dark under his own bed, with nails dug into his ankles to keep him subdued. Hours passed as his captors tortured him for information he refused to give. The memory of pain flooded him as he recounted the ordeal to Detective Collins. He described feeling the floor shake as they forced a wooden panel open, then dropping him through a hidden compartment to keep him imprisoned beneath the floorboards. He spent what felt like days in darkness, surviving on scraps of bread smuggled through the cracks above. He tried to stay silent, fearing that any cry for help would trigger his demise. Each time he heard footsteps, his heart sank, until one moment he heard Emily's muffled voice calling from above. He recognized the determination in her tone. He felt an unfamiliar surge of hope. When he mustered all his strength, he tapped on the wooden floor as his daughter had predicted. That was when Laura called the paramedics. By the time they arrived, his captors had already fled, fearing detection. Collins's jaw tightened as he processed Richard's words. The threats, the kidnapping, the concealment. It was a conspiracy that ran deeper than simple intimidation. He ordered forensic teams to search for fingerprints in the garage and on the wooden panels. He also requested cell phone records to trace the threatening calls. Meanwhile, the local news vans began to arrive, shining bright camera lights on the yellow tape and broadcasting the story of a child's unwavering belief that saved her father from death. Emily became the reluctant heroine of the neighborhood, her brave proclamation echoing through news reports. As the afternoon sun blazed overhead, Collins pulled back the police barrier to allow only essential personnel inside. He needed to ensure that Richard received medical care and that the scene remained uncontaminated until evidence was catalogued. In a nearby medical tent set up by paramedics, Richard lay on a stretcher, his breathing steadier thanks to emergency care. Laura sat beside him, squeezing his hand, tears of relief and fear blending together. She stroked his forehead, whispering apologies for not listening sooner. He squeezed her hand back and forced a weak smile through chapped lips. "I'm alive because of her," he said, nodding toward Emily, who sat in a folding chair clutching buttons. She looked up, her eyes bright but shadowed by fatigue. "Daddy, why did they hurt you?" she asked in a small voice. Richard swallowed and whispered, "They wanted something I wasn't going to give them, sweetheart. But I'm here now, and they won't hurt me again." Detective Collins approached with a notepad, jotting down notes on Richard's condition and his recollection of names or faces. Richard shook his head, saying the kidnappers wore masks and spoke with muffled voices. That evening, as word spread of the rescue, concerned friends and family arrived at the Henderson home. The cozy living room, which earlier had been the site of dread, transformed into a vigil of hope. Candles flickered on the mantel, casting warm light against the white walls. Neighbors brought casseroles and flowers, offering support in hushed tones. Some clutched envelopes containing money, silent gestures to ease the financial burden of medical bills. As the sun set, the police tape remained, a reminder of the danger that still lurked. Detective Collins convened with his team at a small, folding table on the porch, mapping out leads that might identify those responsible. He knit his brows together, analyzing phone records and financial data. Each clue pointed toward a web of greed and intimidation, a scheme that implicated more than just a few local criminals. He knew that cracking the case would require cooperation from unlikely sources. Back inside, Laura read through messages left on social media by neighbors who had witnessed the commotion. One neighbor claimed to have seen a black SUV speeding away moments after the kidnapping, its taillights fading into the night. Another recounted hearing muffled voices near the garage just after midnight. Collins took note of these accounts, preparing to follow up for more precise statements. Meanwhile, Emily fell asleep on a plush red sofa, her head tilted against buttons. Laura covered her with a soft blanket and whispered a silent prayer for normalcy to return. She gazed at Richard, his head resting on a pillow propped against the armrest. His breathing was even, but the color in his cheeks had yet to fully return. She kissed his forehead and promised herself she would not rest until she had answers. The flickering candlelight danced across their faces, as if urging them onward toward justice. At dawn the next day, Detective Collins received an anonymous tip delivering a crucial piece of information. A man, voice trembling, claimed to know the names of those who orchestrated the kidnapping. He asked to meet at a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of town. Collins felt a jolt of anticipation. The tip had the ring of authenticity. He assembled a small tactical team, briefing them on the plan to meet the informant under controlled conditions. Laura watched from the veranda as the detective's car pulled away, taking a chunk of her heart with it. She refocused her energy on nursing Richard through the recovery process. Emily awoke, rubbing her eyes at the morning light, and asked for breakfast. Laura smiled through exhaustion and promised pancakes with extra syrup. The simple domestic ritual felt profound, a testament to life's fragility and the power of faith. At the warehouse, the air was thick with anticipation and the acrid smell of rusted metal. Collins arrived in a plain suit, flanked by two uniformed officers who stood a respectful distance behind. The informant slipped through a side door, glancing over his shoulder as though shadows might follow. He was a wiry man with hollowed cheeks and darting eyes. He introduced himself as Marcus Reed, a low-level enforcer who had grown disillusioned with the crime ring's brutal methods. His voice quivered as he revealed that the mastermind was a local real estate mogul named Arthur Kensington. Kensington's Reputation as a philanthropist masked his ruthless pursuit of power, and he had ordered Richard's abduction after learning of the accountant's attempts to expose fraudulent transactions linked to upcoming construction sites. Marcus produced photographs of Kensington in clandestine meetings, his bodyguards' fingerprints and maps marking safe houses where evidence was stored. Collins listened, absorbing every detail. He felt a cold resolve settle in his chest as he realized the extent of corruption entangled with small-town politics. Kensington's charitable facade had fooled many, but Marcus had seen the true depths of his depravity. The detective secured the photographs and instructed agents to cross-reference them with surveillance footage from local businesses. He also arranged for Marcus to enter witness protection once his testimony was formalized. As the sun climbed higher, Collins knew that the next steps would be dangerous. Bringing down someone as influential as Kensington would require a delicate balance of evidence gathering, legal maneuvering, and ensuring the safety of witnesses. He thanked Marcus and watched him disappear into the morning haze, wondering how many other shadows lurked behind closed doors, waiting to swallow innocent lives. Meanwhile, back at the Henderson home, Richard's health improved steadily. Physical therapy sessions helped him regain strength, but the emotional trauma ran deep. He retreated to a spare bedroom, questioning every knock on the door and every passing car. Laura sat with him, offering quiet reassurance. "We'll get them, Richard. You saved our lives, and now we'll save yours." He nodded, gratitude in his eyes. Emily spent her days coloring drawings of her family, often sketching her father standing triumphantly as detectives led the bad men away in handcuffs. Her art was a testament to belief, a child's unwavering faith in justice. Laura hung the Kiro drawings on the refrigerator, a collage of hope in a time of uncertainty. The detectives occasionally visited, offering updates and collecting additional statements. Each meeting brought them closer to unraveling the conspiracy that threatened to destroy their peace. As Collins delved deeper into Kensington's financial empire, he uncovered shell companies, offshore accounts, and a network of bribery that linked city officials, police officers, and even members of the local bank's board. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. It extended far beyond a simple kidnapping. Collins worked late nights poring over ledgers and interviewing witnesses in dimly lit rooms. Forensics teams excavated Kensington's properties, uncovering hidden vaults containing stacks of cash and forged documents. Agents found old videotapes showing Kensington's associates discussing plans to silence Richard and anyone else who posed a threat. The evidence piled up like a storm on the horizon, and soon enough warrants were issued to seize assets and make arrests. Kensington's once illustrious image began to crumble under the weight of proof and public outrage. In this, the grand courtroom adorned with mahogany panels, the trial of Arthur Kensington commenced on a crisp autumn morning. Journalists, photographers, and curious townsfolk filled the gallery, eager to witness the downfall of a man once considered untouchable. Laura sat beside Richard and Emily, clutching her daughter's hand as their eyes remained fixed on the defendant. Kensington, dressed in a gray suit and blue tie, wore a look of indifference, his slicked-back hair and practiced smile failing to mask the tension in his jaw. The prosecutor laid out the charges: fraud, conspiracy, kidnapping, and attempted murder. He presented evidence meticulously: bank records, witness testimonies, forensic analyses, and even Emily's drawing depicting her father's rescue. Collins took the stand, recounting his team's painstaking investigation and describing the moment they found Richard beneath the floorboards. The jurors listened with rapt attention as the scales of justice teetered toward truth. At the end of a tense day, the jury filed back into the courtroom, their faces etched with determination. Foreperson Ana Delgado rose and delivered the verdict: guilty on all counts. Shockwaves reverberated through the audience as Kensington's demeanor crumbled. He stared blankly, the magnitude of his downfall sinking in. The judge thanked the jurors and set the sentencing date. As the court emptied, Laura wrapped Emily in her arms, tears of relief mingling with optimism. Detective Collins offered a rare smile, acknowledging the triumph of truth. In the weeks that followed, Kensington's assets were seized and imprisoned. Accomplices began cooperating with authorities, exposing the conspiracy's last remnants. Richard returned home, his health restored through therapy and the unwavering support of his family. On a crisp winter afternoon as snow fell, Richard lifted Emily overhead, spinning her in delight. She laughed, her voice echoing like a promise. No darkness could ever hold them again.